Right. Welcome, everyone. This is going to be the first in a series where we have guests on to talk about a topic. Today, we have four attorneys on to talk about crypto businesses, laws, and regulations. We have Jonathan Dunsmoor, Gerard Truesdale, Charles Sexton, and Shanelle Edmonds. If you guys want to introduce yourselves, be awesome. Jonathan? Or Gerard, you can start us off if you want. Yeah, I can hear you.
Have it.
Okay. My name is Gerard Truesdale. I am currently an attorney at the Morton Law Firm. I handle family law, juvenile criminal defense, and intellectual property. I'm also working as a intellectual property and cybersecurity manager for the Cochran and Associates firm as well in North Carolina. I'm looking forward to talking to you today. Thanks for the invite.
Hello, Charles. You want to go?
I'll go. Hello, everyone. I'm Shanelle Edmonds. I am at Eunoia Law, and I have a background in family estate planning and probate. At our firm, we handle business formations, contracts, and some intellectual property. I mainly do the formations and contracts, and I do the probate aspect and some estate planning as well. So happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Charles Sexton. I am an attorney at Eunoia Law Firm. I practice entity formation, contract formation, negotiations, intellectual property, and also work with children's defense. I appreciate the invite and interested to see how this conversation will go on tonight.
My name is Jonathan C. Dunsmoor, Dunsmoor Law. I'm a corporate securities attorney. I've been in the blockchain space for longer than I like to count, since late 2016 when I told everybody to kindly piss off. I also use profanity, so children beware. The things that we talk about are important, so I like to make sure that that is 100% clear. But yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing your questions, concerns, and comments.
Did you want to give us that disclaimer?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do next. This information is not investment advice. It is not financial advice, and it is not legal advice. We are Goss gangs. You're not your attorneys. Everything that you hear during this podcast is not meant to be utilized in any form or fashion as it relates to, like I said, investments, financial advice, or legal advice. Gary, do we have a moderator, or is Alex able to get his mic working?
Muted. I had myself muted and was just talking to a mic. That's what was happening.
That happens. That happens. We've all been there.
Yeah, because I used the mute button on the mic itself, not on Discord. But yeah, I think one of the easiest things we could start talking about is Tornado Cash, how it may impact privacy, what we think about those sanctions, how it relates to freedom of speech because of, Bernstein versus Department of Justice, things like that.
Oh, such a good question. Does anybody want to take this, or does anybody have a thought before I jump in?
No, you got it, John.
Yeah, so Tornado Cash is a protocol mixer, allows you to put in Ethereum, and basically hide the transactional nature of it, so you don't necessarily know where it came from. Which is one of the benefits of a blockchain, is being able to see that transactional history publicly. The crazy thing about Tornado Cash is, because it was effectively just a protocol level system, there was no real entity to go after. And so as of this week, the powers that be have arrested the initial or the developer, the main guy. I can't remember his name to save the life of me because I'm terrible with names. But this is kind of the first shot across our bow as it relates to protocol level anything in Web3. This is kind of the real first test of what does the First Amendment mean? What does transactionality mean at a financial level? I say quite frankly and quite publicly that I believe the government should be more transparent than the people. Now, regardless of your politics, we're going to have to be a lot more transparent with the IRS folks coming aboard, but hopefully they will not necessarily go after the crypto community and will go after the people who owe taxes instead. But as we all know, that is not always the case. So if everything works out with this, Tornado Cash will be a good litmus test on where the world is. But as I've said, kind of before, we are in the business. Anybody who's in blockchain is in the business of disruption. We're challenging the authorities, the powers that be, whether that's banking, securities, intellectual property, for Christ's sakes. I mean, look at the rise in, the deal with intellectual property and NFTs. But yeah, Tornado Cash is a headache.
Yeah, and it's sad. I can see both sides of it, but I think for Ethereum, maintaining the open nature, maintaining privacy is important. I like Vitalik's stance on it. He wants to burn Ethereum of the validators that want to comply with it. It's a harsh tactic, but I think it's one that can work. On the other side of the fence, you have somebody like Kevin O'Leary who thinks it's worth sacrificing that for institutional adoption. Obviously, I think something like Goss is the better middle road than sacrificing privacy, anonymity, and decentralization from Ethereum, though.
I completely agree. I think having a mixed bag is the best answer for this, especially right now, because we are still fighting with regulators. We don't necessarily have a reporting authority. The CFTC and the SEC and the United States are battling over power. There's a couple bills in Congress to possibly determine who has overall authority over digital assets and possibly Web3, right? Because he or she who controls digital assets is probably going to control Web3. And so that's a really scary proposition, because the CFTC, God help them, is not always in the best position to make decisions on the ground. And so they see things at a high, Kevin O'Leary level,
Right.
when in reality, you all, especially at Goss Gang, are far, far ahead of, what the average regulator believes is possible. So, when we're looking at the total transactionality of this space, we haven't even scratched the surface yet.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds, and I think we have a long ways to go before we see that. I mean, the Ripple case started how many?
Well,
Yeah,
just to
Oh.
kind of piggyback off that too. I mean, we're dealing with regulators. How old are those people?
Yeah, they think the internet lives magically in their cell phone, perhaps.
Right. So, I mean, that's part of the scary part too. Is we have people in those high positions who don't even understand these concepts, or can even wrap their pinky finger around these concepts, and by the time they get to a point to make regulations or implement, to change what's going on. I mean, it's constantly evolving, right? So just this constant spiral that we're in.
Yep.
And it's kind of scary when you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, the
would
average
agree.
age of Congress is what, 65 or some such? And I think that is similar for many other regulators and legislators. They're just, these are people who, existed on this planet, 80 years ago. That's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and to have no comprehensive set of federal framework or protection in place, I'm thinking that maybe sector specific privacy laws might help, but as Shanelle stated, making these laws, I'm not quite sure if they're in tune with the technology as well as just the overall purpose of cryptocurrency in the first place.
Right. And I mean, I think Jonathan had mentioned it as well, that, all of this challenges the incumbent institution. And I think that that is a massive threat to them. The idea of random people being able to transact privately or banking the unbanked billions is a threat to, modern banking.
Well, yeah, and it takes the control away from the banks and into the hands of the people. So that's a scary thought. But I mean, just what John mentioned about Web3, I mean, they can't even fully grasp the concept of Web2. So
Right.
here we are.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just how I thought it would be a good topic to kick off this conversation because of how relevant it is. It's happened in the last I think it was 9 days ago, Jonathan? You might be familiar with the date more than I, but
All my days blend together at this point. But yeah, it was very recently. I know he was picked up, I believe this literally this week. But Tornado Cash was effectively blacklisted. And so
yeah, well, another
those
topic on that
Yeah,
you
go
and
ahead.
I had briefly spoken about, they want to sanction wallet addresses that have received Ethereum from, some tornado interaction. And when you and I first spoke about this last week, literally, I think 2 days after the sanction letter came out, I was saying that, it doesn't make sense because there's going to be dusting attacks. And now you have a slew of celebrities like Steve Aoki, Jimmy Fallon, a ton of others that have public facing wallets have all been dusted. And they're now being, banned and sanctioned. And which is exactly what you were worried about and exactly what I said was going to happen. We're seeing it. And I don't think regulators are at all prepared for that. They don't even see that as a threat vector because they're not aware of the entirety of this space or even the tip of the iceberg of what this space is.
And ironically, it was probably about 24 hours later where I was getting the first slew of text messages saying from some of our quote unquote influencer clients, I don't represent Jimmy Fallon, that were saying, oh shit, I got dusted.
Yeah.
What do I do? How do I deal with this?
Man, I told you.
And so,
It just
yeah,
makes sense for some bad actor to want to do that. Or for even, somebody with the best of intentions with the desire to bring a spotlight on this as a problem, right? I could see that position as well. Somebody out there who's just like, yeah, I'm going to send $10 to 100 celebrity wallets and they're all going to get banned and they're going to get pissed because they have a ton of money in those wallets. So yeah, it's sad that it's playing out that way. I think it'll take some more time before we see this whole thing calm down, unfortunately.
it is going to be an ebb and flows. We're going to have situations where things are going to get ugly and dark at times, and I do think at this point we are in a position in the marketplace where things are a little bit stormy. I think that we are, while we have bright lines of where the regulations lies with securities, commodities, intellectual property, some of the FinCEN stuff, some of the treasury stuff, right? We need much more clear lines. I was yelling at a a payment provider earlier because I was trying to purchase NFTs that required or generally required KYC because they were over a certain threshold in the EU, and it was an EU-based company. But I was not over that threshold, and so I've been
Right.
arguing with their payment processor because they require it through this KYC provider. Of saying, it doesn't make sense that you're using this standard when that standard doesn't apply. And so even within the industry, even within the OGs of this space, we still butt heads with everybody else who's in the space because we're still so early. We're still none of us are really competitors. None of us are really looking at this as oh, this is going to be the one all end all be all. I do hope that is the case for Goss, and I think that this will be a really good onboarding situation for especially Web 2 personalities and people who are trying to get into the Web 3 space, but look at it as just this overwhelming, oh my God, what chain do I do? How do I drop an NFT? How do I manage? How do I figure out custody? How do I do all of these things? And most people, unfortunately, who have tried it without having the proper help, whether that's marketing help or legal help, it hasn't worked out so well for the vast majority of products. And that's where, it's really kind of sad because we do see the value of NFTs. They've risen tremendously, from the CryptoKitty days to where, they are now. And the Gauss NFTs are something that is probably going to be fundamental to, the development of the branding ecosystem, the Web3 model of, how do you work with your followers? How do you work with how as a young and up and coming powerful little influencer do you make sure that you're on the right product or you're not going to get hacked? And a lot of that is dealing with technology that I can promise you is super hard for me to find the right programmers. And I'm in this space.
Right. Yeah, something else I think that's interesting with influencers in mind or celebrities, like you have the case up against Mark Cuban and the Mavericks right now, and I think like we're early, we're very early in this whole space in its formative days still. Yeah, Bitcoin's been around for what 13 years now since 2009. That's we're just seeing so many different things being tested. And I think, like I've suspected for the last year and a half, that a lot of brands, entities, celebrities are going to be leery of, just joining those massively decentralized Wild West blockchains, even though that's where currently everyone is. There's a lot of potential loss to themselves and threat to their personal brands and whatnot. Yeah, that's all. I don't know. It's watching this whole thing evolve from this Web 2 space to that amorphous Web 3 concept, which Shanelle, you and I spoke about that a bit. Looking at what other areas, what other businesses that exist now that can exist within blockchains or benefit from blockchains or some sort of tokenized asset. And you were saying that's an area that you were interested in as well.
Yeah, I mean, just to touch from like a branding perspective, when you think of an influencer, just a basic company, like we can take away Nike or Louis Vuitton, but just a basic small business, and you've created this name, you've created this brand, and how do we monetize? So
You're cutting out really bad, Shanelle. I don't
live in the
know.
country. I live.
That's right. You're in North Carolina.
Yeah, so it was raining earlier, so it's a little spotty, but
Oh, that last AMA we
yes.
had last week, my power cut out. Like, I think it was 20 minutes
Oh
into our
man.
AMA. My power just cut out completely. So I understand.
Country Wi-Fi is still holding on. But from a branding perspective and how you monetize your brand, for me, it's interesting to see, comfort level wise, how we lay the foundation and how we can increase the monetization of that brand in a safe space in the digital world. And as you mentioned, kind of going into these decentralized spaces, I mean, there's a lot of scammers out there. There's a lot of people ripping people off. I mean, perfect example, we had the Nike incident. We had the Hermes incident with USPTO with people using their trademarks in the NFT space. So figuring out to, one, create a safe space for them, and two, how to advise them on how to do it safely as a brand. That's the space that I'm in, and that's the space that interests me in the different industries. And kind of what we talked about as well. I mean, it's coming across multiple areas of law, right? It's not just the business aspect; it's the probate aspect, real estate aspect. So finding out how all of these things will integrate in these different spaces, and how we're going to classify them or how we're going to value them, it's very interesting. It's an interesting topic for sure.
Yeah. And I just want to
Yeah.
say for everyone listening real quick, like they're not paid actors, by the way. We have spoken about Goss. And it's just the same conversations that I've had with brands and artists and stuff. Like a lot of them want a space like this. And I think each of you as well, like see the value of something like Goss or Goss itself in this space. Not just value, but like the need and necessity of it.
Yeah.
I think you were about to speak though, Gerard.
I was just kind of piggybacking on Shanelle again, talking about the issues with this, and one thing that kind of stands out to me in terms of just trying to be at the point where we can pursue legal action or anything related to the law is the fact that jurisdiction. One of the main kind of components of blockchain is the fact that a lot of it can be done without somebody sharing their ledger's actual location, or a lot of anonymous communication, and that's fine. But with that, it kind of makes jurisdiction hard, because we're talking how nodes are located in different areas, different jurisdictions. Cryptocurrency software might be, difficult to determine where the physical location of it may be, and then just overall, having laws in place for this that can be compatible with certain jurisdictions, it's just not there, So that's something that kind of sticks out to me.
Yeah. Did you have something to add, Charles? I saw you took yourself off mute. No, okay. I think another area we could talk about, and I think like 15 minutes from now, we'll probably get to some of these questions. But what do you think, like each of you, any of you, what do you think is the area of liability for some DeFi protocols or chains themselves? Because I think that's something else we're going to see become tested from these individual suits, from the Tornado Cash sanctions, things like that. I think we're going to see more attempts to hold groups and organizations accountable and liable. So where do you think that might go in the next year or two? Anyone want to take it? Anyone want to touch that one?
you guys start, and I'll back clean up. Yeah, because I got some like dark horse theories that I think there's going to be a lot of litigation.
I mean, I'd agree. I would agree. And I think, to Gerard's point, a lot of, venue interests will be tested as well. Some of these entities have international, existences. Some of them are in quote unquote what they believe to be protected spaces, like the Caymans or something like that. I think it's going to be interesting.
I'd be interested to see if, taking it back to the 1L days, if we get some tort litigation in there with like some conversion or trespass to chattel. I mean, there's gonna
I might
be
have
a
cut off.
country still.
Oh, hey Chanel. Hey, it's me, Alex. I finally got my mic working. But you might need to speak into your mic a little bit closer. That might help a bit. Just saying, Chanel.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yep, much better.
Yeah. AirPods. So that might be the issue too.
It was better for a second.
I don't think it's working now.
Did somebody else want to chime in? Charles, Gerard, on that issue of liability? And then we'll start hitting some of these questions, because I think we do have some good questions lining up too. Nope. All right. Well, Alex, I think you get to take over at this part for some Q&A.
Yeah. Actually, I have one
when
personal
Chanel-
question. Sorry.
Oh, real quick, Alex, I'm sorry. When Chanel gets back, I do want to touch on the trespass to chattel, because holy shit, that makes a lot of that's a really excellent point that nobody talks about. I literally had a young lawyer almost mess this up. Was it yesterday or the day before? Like I said, all my days blend together. But they were about to use a profile picture for their law firm, and you don't have commercial rights to all the NFTs that you buy unless you have a a Bored Ape or another NFT that allows for that. So using it for your own private rights or putting it on your own profile is one thing, but using it as a company image, possibly a mascot, is a whole nother issue. So that's what Chanel is talking about with trespasses at chattel. And so I'd love to talk to her more about that when the internet keeps working.
I mean,
but
I think you can touch on that even a bit more, because that is a common piece of, tort law that I think everyone here, attorney-wise, is familiar with. And I think it's another interesting area of that will be AI generated or any generative assets, because that's going to be tested as well, right? Like you have projects creating assets. Where do those rights lie? And who has that IP? And then for something made by Midjourney or Dolly or Imogen or, anything, DeepMind, GPT-3 or GPT-X, all of those very, very interesting AI projects, where does that look as well for this area of law?
It's such a good question. I've asked before. Some nice person on LinkedIn said that they were building it, but I don't know if I haven't heard anything from them since then. But I would like a model where Goss is going to implement some of this, but for everybody still out in the Wild West and the beyond the walled garden of Goss, we don't know what the terms and conditions are for the secondary sale of a transaction. So if you sell something to someone else and they've minted it on a website, say Bored Apes or cyber brokers or cake apes or anyone, doesn't matter, and then you sell it to someone else, well, that the secondary sale doesn't bring those terms of service with it. It can't be binding on that person, but however their intellectual property rights can, and so it becomes this really weird thing where we need a Web3 app that allows for non-Goss things, because the Goss stuff will be handled and you'll be able to see that. But for everything, like I said, outside the walled garden, we will need to know what the hell the rights are. If I have commercial rights to this and I can go open up a burger joint using that image, then I need to be able to know that. I need to be able to ascertain that pretty quickly, and ideally it needs to be in the code, right? So there is no question. There is no issue. Instead of us damn lawyers having to search through terms of services and see which one was, valid at that point in time, and that headache. But misusing and using NFTs is just so rampant right now, and people aren't necessarily taking aim at the space because, well, quite frankly, there's not a lot of money to be taken aim at, with everything being down. But I do expect once things start going back up, and they say, "Whoa, wait a second, you're using our NFT for commercial gains, and you don't have those rights. It's a private limited right. We're going to go after you." We recently had a settlement against the DAO because they failed to deliver on any of the things that they promised, and then booted a member. So it becomes a situation where you've really got to watch what you say, and then when you say it to someone else or when it's sold on the secondary market, some of those words matter, and so the trust battle is absolutely be litigated against. I imagine that starts those kind of coming soon.
Right. I think it's interesting. You were just talking about that. I wanted to look into my notes from a while back where I was writing about different ownership levels of NFTs. Because I know I've jotted notes about this and some solutions we might offer and work within Goss. Creating something that looks like GPL or BSL for, normal open source or business use software code, but for tokens, a NFT or token ownership license of sorts, and standardize that language so it can just be plug and play, because that's really what it should be. And I think there's also some work being done with real estate NFTs or tying NFTs to physical assets that kind of skirts the similar concept.
The real estate side is tough, and as everybody else can talk about, doing a traditional real estate transaction is absolutely miserable. So, if anybody wants to talk on what the headache that is, please feel free.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, so much better. For now.
Yeah,
Oh,
amazing.
I reset my Wi-Fi.
Welcome to Web 3, right? Mine does that too. As soon as I reset it, it's like, oh yeah, we're happy now. Oh cool, we're gonna do Web 3 stuff now. Let me reset it. Like,
right.
I hate
The real
AT&T
estate
and
aspect is a nightmare. It's a huge nightmare. Just regular real estate transactions, and then when you're doing it in a digital format, the issues that come to my mind from a probate perspective, specifically in North Carolina, when someone passes away owning real estate, the real estate passes outside of the estate and goes automatically to the heirs, right? So in that context, when we're talking about digital real estate, our laws haven't even grasped the concept of digital real estate. So we have no classification to put that in. And how does it pass? What does that deed look like to the heirs? How do they sell it? Do they have the authority to sell it? Is there going to be some sort of tax step up basis from that? So there's a whole circle of things going around in the space of crypto and Web3 and all of these other digital assets from a valuation perspective, and not just estate assets, but from a business valuation perspective as well. Again, the regulations, all of these things kind of play a part in how we kind of coordinate everything together. So it's really interesting to me to see how the complexities of just your basic real estate transaction is going to mesh with the digital real estate transaction, which is then going to evolve into a passing to your heir real estate transaction, that chain of title, if that makes sense.
I think you and I, or the three of us, myself, you, and Charles, spoke about in our call that, what is in general, right now there's not a means by which it is easy for somebody to pass on digital assets at all, like a Steam account and all the games attached, or an Apple account and all the media attached to it, things like that. Let alone once you get into the new space of tokenized assets, which I think will be easier to pass on. But that whole area of law is still, we're a ways off, I think, from seeing how that plays out.
Well, yeah, and I know that John can touch on like the SEC stuff, right? But if we're looking at it from an estate perspective, the example I like to give is, say you have a brokerage account with Fidelity or Vanguard or Edward Jones, right? When you pass away, what we're looking at is the date of death value of those accounts. And then as those values increase or decrease, we have to account for that value increase to the clerk's office, to which you're paying probate fees. And depending on the size of your estate, you may be paying estate tax fees to Uncle Sam, to the IRS. So in the space of crypto and in the space of NFTs and in the space of digital real estate, depending on how we classify that, if for some reason the value of those assets increase after date of death, how do we report that to the clerk? And then how do we report that on our taxes? If they decrease, are you going to be taxed to an extent that there's a significant step down from that date of death value? Or how are you going to be able to account for that decrease? Because it's hard to kind of see that up and down value when it comes to crypto assets. And that's kind of been my analysis of that side from a probate perspective. And there's just no laws, especially in North Carolina, to classify how we classify those things. Do we classify it as personal property, or is it going to be classified as something like a stock would be classified on an inventory of assets? There's just not there.
Right.
So
I want to step in real quick and ask, we have about 15 minutes left before we hit the 1 hour mark. Is everyone good to go to 70 or 75 minutes? If not, that's cool too. Thumbs up, thumb down. Gerard, Jonathan.
I have a hard stop at 7:30, but if I'll bow out.
Solid.
Good.
All right, yeah, if you have to bow out, by all means, just interrupt and say you got a dip. And we appreciate you guys, having this conversation. But I do think we should get to some of these questions, because I think some of them are pretty juicy. You guys can't see the document that Alex and I are looking at where these questions are stacking up from our chat, but I think some of them are pretty good.
Yeah, so I think I'm just going to take it away, and we're going to do some of the Q&A for now, because I think that can take some time as well. So the first question that we do have is by Austin, and he says, do you think centralization will help or hurt Web3 in general? Who should be the authority that dictates or create the laws and regulations that can protect basic consumers?
Good question.
Anyone up for that question?
You went out on my end. I couldn't hear the question.
All right, I'll try repeating one more time. Do you think centralization will help or hurt Web3 in general? And who should be the authority that dictates or create the laws and regulations that can protect basic consumers?
If anybody doesn't want it, I'll take a crack at it.
Yeah, go for it, Jonathan.
Okay, so I think centralization is part of the evolution. I do not think that we as a global society need centralization for everything. For example, Tornado Cash, I think if the code had limited it to a certain respectable amount where bad actors couldn't launder significant amount of money through the protocol, it probably wouldn't have been an issue. But as we've seen with Celsius, Voyager, all of the other people who have been screwed over because they were over leveraged and the bottom fell out because of Terra. We can't have an entire industry reliant on a bunch of what amounts to a bunch of bad actors. And whether they were intentionally bad or just negligently bad, well, that's for the future lawsuits to decide. But I think there's a combination in a world for both. Right now, we don't have decentralization. There's a couple things that are slowly starting to move that way, Bitcoin being arguably the grandfather of them all. But we need to get much more farther down the line before we can fully give up centralization. So there's a world for both.
I think Lauren had a follow-up question on top of that. And she said that, do you foresee there being an international regulator for crypto? Or do you think that it would be realistic to regulate crypto on an international scale? So I know the US government has some regulatory office that's doing that, but do you think there's going to be a worldwide regulatory international just for crypto itself?
Again, such good
Yeah, I
question.
would think so. I would think there should be. I mean, it's a global currency. People are using it globally. Like John said, there has to be some sort of centralization somewhere. It's just the proper people that we put in place as a community.
Right. So domestically, we have the SEC. What is that? The CFTC, I think, is one of them. We have a handful of different organizations that manage it. So what do you think about an organization that already exists, like the IMF, for instance, stepping in and saying, okay, we're going to regulate some sort of international, either CBDC or, some other current, like if they want to step in and say, yeah, USDC and their new Europe offering, they want to regulate those. What do you think about that?
I think honestly, a lot of the breakdown and regulation of crypto will be based on what the EU is doing, especially if you look at the way that some of the crowdfunding laws that were put in place. A lot of that came from over the European Union. So I do think that definitely needs to be a third party per se in charge of that, from just regulating and within that understanding how to the formation of smart contracts, all that falls within. So there's going to have to be a regulating body to control this at some point.
I agree. I think that it's probably going to be by treaty, and that there's probably not going to be one overarching authority. The IMF or any type of legacy organization, including the CFTC, kind of makes me shudder because lobbyists and all that really gives me a lot of heartburn as an American. But outside of that, with the understanding that there are people who do dirt, we just have to be better than them. We have to have open source or validated protocols. We have to have things that are audited. We have to have things that are battle tested as best as one can be, and we have to kind of set a gold standard that's far above the gold standard of the current markets of commodities, securities, and anything else that these things may be classified into. I think if we look at this as an overall kind of industry issue, then we can solve it together as an industry. One of the problems I have with I'm in New York, so one of the problems I have with New York DFS, if any DFS people are listening, I welcome. But I got a call after they published their green list, and they wanted to talk about KYC. And I said, you already have problems with KYC. There's not a way to KYC everyone. You monitor the on and off rails for fiat. That makes it much easier to catch the bad actors, right? And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, it's very simple. Tell me who Satoshi Nakamoto is. And of course they couldn't. So if you can't tell me who holds the most Bitcoin out of all of us, then how are you going to tell me that you're going to require KYC for everything going forward. The
Somebody
same thing goes
moving
with Ethereum.
$100. Yeah,
Exactly.
so there's two other things before we move to another question. The reason I brought up those legacy entities is because, like you, I also shudder to think of how the space would continue to evolve or not evolve. It might just be stymied because you have a bunch of old dusty regulators trying to step into areas where they don't understand at all the fundamentals. And the second thing is, I do think there's a lot of room for improvement in this space of individual entities, or things like Goss to exist, or USDC. I'm a big fan of USDC. I know not everyone out there is, but I think their efforts of transparency and setting some level of high standard. They do, what is it, monthly audits that they publish? It's in
third-party monthly audits. Yeah.
Yeah, they're remarkable. Like you said, setting those gold standards in this space internally, I think is the right approach and where I'd like to see it go. So, did you have another question, Alex? Or I know we have a bunch. But...
Yes, we do. Of course we do. So we have one from Burner RS. And he or she says that, what are the legalities of a AAA game adding NFTs for in-game items? Would people have to opt in to be able to participate in the Web3 in-game economy to avoid unwanted tax issues? So, games and NFTs, that seems like a pretty complicated topic itself, but does anyone want to expand on that?
I think,
Could you repeat that?
yeah, so his question was about AAA games or large game companies that want to add NFT, add blockchain assets or tokenized assets into their game. What does that look like legally? And will people have to opt in? I think it's the next iteration of digital asset taxes, which we haven't really done a lot with domestically, but I'll let one of you guys answer it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a whole nother fireside chat, to be honest. I think it starts with the user terms. I mean, when you purchase the game or you're using the game, think of it as like if you're on PlayStation, right? They have certain terms and conditions on how you engage within the PlayStation community. And if you violate those terms, then you'd be kicked out, or your account would be suspended. So I would think that it would start there. And then obviously you have a group of attorneys who can make sure that IP is all together, how they're transferring those rights, if they're non-transferable. But it starts with the user terms and conditions.
I would agree with that, Shanelle. And as a fellow gamer, I think incorporating NFT into any kind of game not only makes it a little bit more fun, to play, it just kind of enhances the gaming situation as a whole to push it forward. So yeah, incorporating aspects of NFT into the user policy, PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo. I think at some point that they're going to have to visit that, because virtual currency is cool, but you can't cash out on VCs from NBA 2K or something like that. So yeah, I think it's headed that direction.
Right, and what does that even look like? Like you said, it's a whole other chat to just cover this specific topic, but I think regulators understand in-game assets more than they do any other type of tokenized asset, right? And I think that's definitely a way that we can explore that conversation with those federal regulators in saying, well, do you want to tax this kid for a sword that he got in-game? Where do you draw that line? Because that begins to open up a massive Pandora's box, I think. But yeah, great question.
So it's almost safe to say that there isn't really...
Too.
What was that,
Oh, yeah.
Chanel?
So that would bring me to Fortnite too. Then you're going into some possibly child labor
Yeah, that's what I mean. A whole big Pandora's box. Like, oof, there's so many things. And I think it's all areas of law that we're going to explore over the next 5 and 10 years, especially internationally, because it
Yeah.
does begin to make more and more sense. Like, we look at it in the US and say, oh, well, if you're only making 5 or 10 grand a year playing a game, that's not a lot, because against our medians and our cost of living, it's not. But when you look at emerging markets, which is the largest area of growth for crypto, which I think many blockchain games are just missing entirely right now. But that's a whole other thing, right? Like, what's the median income in India right now? I think it's about 10 grand US dollars. So when you look at it from those aspects of, those other countries, that's a replacement income. You could feed families off of something like playing a game. That's a reality we're looking at in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think it'll be interesting to explore how those laws evolve.
Yeah, wouldn't it have been awesome if Elden Ring had NFTs?
Well, see, I don't want to go too deep into the weeds because I do actually have, I think it's next month on the 22nd or 29th that I'm aiming for, blockchain gaming discussion. But I don't think every game does need NFTs. I do think that it'll benefit many. But we first have to focus on creating good games before we shoehorn in, tokenized assets, because right now we're in like the Pong era of blockchain-based gaming. So, sorry for that caveat, Alex. You can go to
that's good. I think this next question is kind of towards you, Gary, in a way, but I think anyone can answer that as well. And this is by Ferret. Ferret, he's always in the chat, so thank you, Ferret. And his question is, what kind of protections would Goss expect to include in agreements with early partners that want to sign up their projects on the Goss blockchain? I think that's the first part of the question. I'm not sure if Gary or anyone else wants to.
So I think Jonathan and I can tackle this one in different parts. I'm rereading the question. Basically, what kind of protections do we have or will we have with our early partners? And how will we mitigate our legal exposure or liability in this space? I think a lot of that initially will come down to our selection process and onboarding process. Like, the goal of Goss, right, is to cut out bad actors before ever even working with them or allowing them to launch on Goss. That's a first level of protection. Legally or contractually, we will likely be structuring it as such that we can hold those individuals, parties, brands, whatever, accountable if they do have some sort of bad action, or if they have bad actors or do something within the ecosystem that harms the ecosystem itself, harms their holders, whatever. Jonathan, did you want to expound on that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, because we're in a brave new world, right? Some of these things haven't been fleshed out, but I'm going to tell another anecdotal story of when someone we were working with almost got duped by a Tesla coin a little while ago, and this gentleman wasn't sharpest knife in the toolbox, but he shouldn't have necessarily fallen for this. But it was something that looked so good that and Elon Musk being a fan of crypto, it could happen. And so the idea generally is to make sure that there is, in any type of process, good in, so good can go out, right? And that's what we're going to focus on, and making sure that that is contractually obligated to the participants in the marketplace is going to be quintessential to the development of this ecosystem, but also Web3, because as Gary, expounded upon, emerging markets are so important to this ecosystem that we don't know where the next PewDiePie or Mr. Beast or other influencers is going to come from, but they're out there. We know they are, whether they're TikTok stars like Shanelle, or there's some other person who's all of a sudden just going to pop up with a live stream camera and a good voice, or an opinion that everybody tends to vibe with. So validating, who these people are and making sure that they're building legitimate things and trying to, accumulate a good audience is really important. We're not going to have any neo-Nazis or any, kind of radical people and things like that. We have to curtail those types of behaviors because we are, we are a little bit of a walled garden. We are a society here. We are not part of the wild west of DeFi. We've got, gardens here. We are a little bit more protected than everything out there because everything out there is absolutely terrifying. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a strength of ours. I've said it since the onset of all these conversations that I think it's that is part of our value proposition, that we're a curated space. And I think that'll become more readily visible to people when they see brands willing to adopt it. And what you were talking about, like the future of influencers in emerging markets, look at KB Lame. For anyone who, he's a TikTok influencer, the guy didn't say a damn word. And he just went, "You're stupid." He gestured to people that were being stupid or did stupid things, and he blew up over the last couple of years. He's from Senegal, and I think that's going to happen more and more and more over the following years. And then you're going to have web native influencers. I've spoken about this a couple of times, VTubers. It's such a fascinating aspect of this space of the evolution toward Web3 that you're going to have digital natives. You don't know who the real person is behind this, animated avatar. We do know many of them in the transitional step now, but there will be purely web native influencers in the future. And what does that even look like? That person's running through a VPN and nobody knows who they are. They could be as anonymous as somebody like Satoshi Nakamoto. So many interesting things with this whole space. That's why I love, this sort of conversation. But I'll let you get to your next question, Alex.
No worries, that's a really great explanation. And yeah, I can see for myself that it's going to get pretty complicated in the future if you're a lawyer in crypto. So kudos to you attorneys sticking your necks out there. So the next question that we do have, sorry about that, go for it.
It was just me laughing. Yeah.
Oh,
the job is never boring.
For sure. So the next question that we do have is by Machine Teacher. And he or she says that, does the Tornado Cash sanction only impact Ethereum, or does it impact other blockchains like Polygon, AVAX, and so on?
It technically affects everybody at this point. Gary was right in that it was kind of a poison pill for the entire ecosystem, one in which we didn't really need. The good news is there's so much bad news right now that, it's kind of getting lost in the waves. The DOJ just issued a subpoena for SFOX for a John Doe account. We're still trying to figure out this ecosystem. And so, unfortunately, if there was a interaction with Tornado Cash, I recommend not having Tornado Cash anymore. If you were dusted with it, I would recommend, sending it to the null address at this point. That is, I previously disclaimed that is not legal advice, but this is legal advice. And I'll gladly fight anybody who's, been dusted. I think that was just only in Web3 can you send people money and blacklist
It'd be a crime
them.
for the recipient who can't stop it.
Exactly. It's not like I'm bringing you a bunch of $100 bills, powdered in cocaine. So yeah, it is a mess. And, unfortunately or fortunately, us pesky lawyers have to figure out what it means, not only for our clients, but for the overall ecosystem. We're kind of all in this together. So those types of Tornado Cash issues that affect the entire ecosystem, regardless of what chain you're on, almost everybody has an Ethereum based wallet. It really does suck. It has created problems that we were hoping not to deal with for quite some time.
Right. And I think it's also going to I think somebody in our chat earlier, I don't know who it was, asked about treasuries being dusted and things like that. And yeah, it's all a threat. And that's why these regulators who just don't understand what they're regulating, like this whole sanction, like I said, when this first came up and Jonathan and I were on a phone call talking about it, I was like, yeah, this is going to happen and it's going to be bad. I don't see how anyone can think this is a good piece of action or legislation because of all the potential ways it can fail, which we're watching happen. And it will ripple across every blockchain. I mean, everything we're seeing in this space is all, testing and building these foundations. Yep. It's going to be interesting.
Just a quick question. Oh, sorry. Have you guys dealt with any court cases yet, or have seen any court cases yet regarding to the Tornado Cash being blacklisted or so?
I don't think anything's been filed yet. I know there was rumblings, but I haven't checked Pacer or any of those things yet to see if anybody's made any moves on it. I know there's been a lot of articles.
Yeah, I think there's two other things that are interesting to explore there. We'll see explored, I think, because he's right. Like, there aren't many cases going through about it yet. But I do think somebody's going to probably try to test it on the grounds of due process and free speech, right? Like, code is free speech. That is part of our legal system and has been since the 90s, since a case I mentioned earlier, Bernstein versus Department of Justice. And this functionally changes that. It's a regulatory body acting contrary to case precedent, and it'll definitely get tested. But we're not there yet. It's only a week in.
We've sadly got a long way to go in this awesome world. I mean, I'm excited, but I'm also slightly terrified.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess we're gonna move on. Oh, sorry.
I was saying we're all terrified. It's scary.
Okay, so we're going to move on to our next question. This is by Sean Cal. This is not necessarily related to Goss, but he says that, have there been any talks in the crypto DeFi circle about creating some sort of crypto committee, that being project heads and crypto attorneys to come together and be the helping and connecting body to help shape regulation working directly with government bodies and politicians in general?
There's a bunch of efforts like that already being attempted, some good, some not. I don't want to point at which ones I personally think are good and bad. You can Google that, and I think you'll find a fairly wide consensus with lines drawn in the sand, because you have some that think the entire space should be heavily regulated. Like, that's a movement that a number of projects or centralized projects are trying to become compliant with these third-party committees. So short answer, yes, there's a bunch of them already in the works. Hell, we just watched two of them launch the same week last month for the metaverse. One of them headed up by Facebook Meta, and another one a week prior to that, I think, headed up by, I don't even remember the organizations. They're both pretty large already. But yeah, it's going to be something that continues to happen. USDC is functionally trying to do similar with a number of their aspects. They want to be a sort of unifying authority of sorts. I applaud their efforts for what that's worth.
All right, so I think there isn't any more questions on so far. So I just want to add on if there's any closing remarks that anyone has to say, or your thoughts on crypto laws in general and about the space.
I guess I can add, I think as far as the business perspective goes, I think that it's very important in this space if you are going to create a business or anything like that, have the solid foundation, have the proper entity formed, talk to the proper lawyers, make sure that you have the IP rights, so that you don't have to go to someone like John, or someone like us and you fucked up. Excuse my language.
No,
But
that's
you
totally
fucked up,
okay.
so now we got to clean it up.
Yeah.
Or all the money that you made is going to be paid to us.
Yep. I mean, that's why we're doing things right this early on with Goss, right? We want to have a very strong foundation that we're launching from.
Just to add on that note, is there any difference between setting up a regular business and setting up a business that has to do with crypto? I'm sure there is a lot, but like, is there any like main differences that people kind of overlook in that sense?
Insofar as the formation of the business itself, like, Goss is primarily we're a Delaware C Corp. So, I mean, the business structures themselves are still the same. We do have some states trying to recognize DAOs. And then I know Jonathan and I have spoken at length multiple times of the issues working with DeFi or anonymous projects, because that's something we're just now encountering, right? Like, we're doing legitimate business in this space with DeFi projects and not publicly doxed teams. They might be KYB'd, but like, how does signing a contract look with a project like that? And we're just seeing a lot of that. One of you guys can comment more on it, but guys or gals, I apologize. I call everyone dude, Shanelle.
No, I mean,
the
I
DeFi
would just
element
say,
is
I hate to say it, but, just see an attorney. Have them help you, because just from my ventures on TikTok, as John said, I like to go on TikTok a lot. You see these scammers and people perpetrating just to say, set up an LLC or it's this easy, not realizing that they're giving illegal, not helpful legal advice. So, depending on what you're trying to do with the company, you need to make sure that you just meet with an attorney and make sure that the entity that you formed based off of what you're trying to do with that entity makes the most sense.
Yeah. So if
cannot
anyone here
stress
is,
enough.
oh, sorry about that.
No, I was just saying I can't stress that enough. If you have a question about launching a project, especially if it involves a token or NFTs or anything like that, even if it just involves NFTs and you say, "Oh, I'm just copying this," where did you get the artwork for? What, are the intellectual property rights? When it comes to, the tokenization or the cryptocurrency element, do you have a platform that actually works? If not, you're going to run into some serious SEC issues. And so, I mean, it can't be overstated that these things really matter. And having a conversation with a competent lawyer who's a veteran in this space, as everybody on this panel is, it will make your life significantly easier when you learn that what you're doing is fine, or they know how to make it fine, versus having to be in a situation where, as Shanelle said, you're going to have to pay us a bunch of money to unscrew situations, and those take a massive amount of time, and they generally, for the most part, even at this level, don't necessarily go so well because the regulators look at it as, at least at least nowadays, they look at it and say you should have known better. You should have at least got legal counsel, or you should have recognized that you were dealing with a complex issue that was above your pay grade.
Right. And I think that goes with affiliation to other projects too. We've seen that happen on the small and large scale, with Celsius and Terra Luna, all of that stuff. They were working with synthetic assets, which in the TradFi world, traditional finance world, that's legal and regulated. Those creating synthetic assets and selling them as whatever financial vehicle. It's heavily regulated, but it's legal in that space. And then you have, these crypto entities trying to do similar, building these massive houses of cards that are beyond over leverage and watching them crumble down, and then everyone else getting caught up around it. Like, we haven't seen the end of that story or that situation. That's going to be going on for another year or more, and we'll probably hear about some lawsuits down the road, I'm sure. It's, I don't know. Do it right from the beginning. Like he said, ask professionals. I'm fairly knowledgeable in the legal space, but I'm not an attorney, and I wouldn't claim myself to be an expert in that field, which is true of most fields. Just reach out to experts. Ask people who are smarter, more knowledgeable than you. Doesn't hurt, ever. So... But I would like to say thank you to all of you for joining us. I'd really like to do this again in the future, in a month or something. Have everyone on again, or whoever can make it. It'd be great. But
Sure.
It looks like we lost one. So we're going to wrap this up. We've been at an hour and 15-ish minutes. So Jonathan, Gerard, Charles, and Shanelle, thank you all for joining us. To anyone else who would,
Thank you for everybody that was listening this evening. Appreciate it.
Yeah, this was a great turnout. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Thank you all for being here. And for anyone else that's listening in later to the recording, Jonathan Dunsmoor, he speaks at a lot of conventions around the country. So definitely check him out. Shanelle, you can check her out on TikTok. We'll have a link somewhere to her account. But thank you all for listening in, and looking forward to having more of these conversations in the future. Alex, I'll let you sign it off.